Hello, everybody, and welcome to the late night zone on the Tarda Zone. So, before I was due to come on, I was going to talk about something completely different. But then, you know what? I decided about 5 minutes before we were going to stream, I decided, maybe not. Do you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm actually going to talk about something positive, and we're going to get as much interaction with you guys as we possibly can. I will throw up some of your comments as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look forward, but also looking back at the same time, if that makes sense. What I mean is we're going to talk about RTD. Now, we have spoke about RTD quite a lot on this channel since his announcement, but what I want to talk about tonight in particular, and want to get you guys involved as well, is we're going to start talking about some of our favorite episodes of the RTD era. Yeah. And we will also talk about some of those stories that divide the fandom and some that fans obviously outright hate. So what we'll do is we'll go season by season. I think that'll be easier to do. We can narrow it down, obviously. So we will start with obviously Christopher Eccleston's first and only season under RTD. Obviously, the show was absent, and we got a reboot. And let's be honest, it could have went either way for series one, but let's be honest, he hit the ground running. So let's talk about, obviously, we'll go through them all. So we'll start with Rose. And I want to know what. Actually, do you know what you could do? Let me know as a Doctor Who fan. Obviously, some of you guys, huge classic Who fans. Obviously, there's some guys that jumped on the show when it came back in 2005, which we're grateful to have new fans. So hopefully we can get your perspective too. But let me know, guys, what did you actually think of the first episode, Rose? Was it a good introduction to Doctor Who? And yeah, we'll start there. What did you think of Rose? Well, while obviously you are putting your comments up, I'll tell you what I thought. Obviously 2005. I remember the time I was actually doing security. At the time, I had to try to get me life obviously back on track. Sometimes, unfortunately, you might slip off those tracks, and you've got to get yourself back on the tracks, as they say, or back on the saddle, if anybody likes that analogy. But yeah, I remember, look, I was mesmerized when Doctor Who came back on TV. Rose for me was a great introduction. Now I've watched it recently, and I will say the CGI doesn't hold up, which kind of gives it a bit of a charm, I think. And that's the beauty about Doctor Who. Where am I calling? Doctor Who. I look, the moment I knew Doctor Who was back, for me personally, wasn't the scene that everybody talks about where he grabs Rose's hand and says "run." For me, is actually where Rose is following him, and then he stops in the middle of the street and he gives the speech about how he could feel the earth and stuff, and then he drops her hand and then he walks off. That's when I knew Doctor Who was actually well and truly back. Um, so yeah, for me it was a good fourth solid episode. I actually really did enjoy it. Now, obviously, there are a few things in it that don't age quite well. I mean, for example, Mickey Smith being sucked into the bin and stuff like that. But that's Doctor Who, isn't it? I suppose. Um, but other than that, again, what holds this together is the writing and the character development in the first episode. Um, so yeah, for me, Rose was a solid start. You don't have to give a rating. All I'm really looking for, guys, is what you thought of Rose. What did it have an impact on you? Did you think when you saw the first episode that this was actually going to be a great show? So they're the type of responses I'm looking for. But as I said, I will throw in. So as I've spoke about Rose, what I'll do is now I will put some of your comments up. So we have one here. I think Rose was a good episode. I like the basement man, Clive. Yeah, I did like Clive. It was sad when he got shot, actually, I have to say, um, in front of his wife and child. So even then, RTD wasn't afraid to do stuff like that. That was very bold in the first episode, if you kind of think about it. Then we got Dave Travels Through Time, Channel 2, says, great story, was just turning 15 when I saw her here in the US in 2006. Let's see what other comments we have. Shelley says she thought it was nice. There you go. Bad Wolf 66 says, I remember it like it was yesterday. The episode Rose is still strong in my mind. Fantastic. We got one from Daniel the Legend. He says, I would say a solid 7, as it brings new fans in but keeps the classic fans, as it has a classic villain creating a callback, says Daniel. Yeah, that's one thing that obviously is a theme with the RTD era, is that he did manage to keep fans, long-term fans of the show, happy while introducing it to new people. Uh, Raymond says it was good. The bin eating scene doesn't bother me. It's the London street with no cars parked on it stands out. The cleanest street I've ever seen. Yeah, they probably cleaned it up for the purposes of Doctor Who. I'm just trying to. I know some of you have put a second or third comment, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get as many people as I can that haven't commented on. So just bear with me. So we got Michael says, I have Doctor Who Rose 10 out of 10, says Michael. Who else have we got? Just bear with me. Obviously, I'm trying to get through them as quick as I can. The third Doctor says, Graham Bloody Norton. Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, Graham Norton actually spoiled it for everybody, if I remember. There's a clip. There's a clip on YouTube. He's come watching it. He didn't mean it, but it was it's comedy gold, man. It's comedy gold. Renee says, although it wasn't my first episode, it was the starting point for me to become a fan, and I really like Rose and love to rewatch it. And we've got John, who said, I didn't think it would be a success. I was skeptical about the new series until I seen the first episode. Yeah, a lot of fans, I have to be honest, I was a bit apprehensive myself, but at the same time, for me, it was just great to see Doctor Who back. it was talked about for years and stuff, and it never really materialized. And the fact that it was actually happening was yeah, I was in a different zone back then, man. I couldn't wait. I have that excitement again now that I know he's coming back, because he really did understand. He did really understand his audience and understand how to connect. But as I said, he also had a great knack of introducing new fans, new viewers to the show, and he didn't alienate the fandom. We've got another comment there by Six Nicks, says, even though Rose was a solid start. I do agree. Right, so we'll move through these really fast, because if we spend this long on one episode, obviously we'll be here all night, and that's not the plan. Obviously, um, I know some of you will have to go to bed soon, but we do have another one from Philip Archer that just popped up, and I didn't read out a comment, so I'll just read this one out. The story that convinced me Doctor Who was back was actually the Unquiet Dead. I think you meant to say there, but yeah. Great episode, but we will be getting onto that. So the next episode, obviously, is the end of the world. It was Christopher Eccleston's second outing. Obviously, he brought Rose onto a space platform where they were going to watch Earth being basically destroyed by an expanding sun, wasn't it? If I'm correct in saying. And I think this is the episode for me where the Doctor did kind of show a bit of his reckless side when it came to Rose. He kind of just fobbed it off. And remember, he had that moment on the platform where she basically gives out to him because, he's brought her to this place, and stuff has gone down, and she's overwhelmed by it all. But again, it was another solid episode. I love the episode, and it is quite sad at the end, because Rose and the Doctor are just watching, obviously, the Earth as it's being destroyed, and you see the rocks floating by, and it is quite sad. Obviously, that was the episode that introduced us to Lady Cassandra as well, which was brilliant character, I have to say. And remember, this was kind of the first time where we got to see different. Well, it was the first time in New Who that we got to see different species of alien, which was good as well. But I actually thought that was another great episode for me personally. I think the first two episodes, that's what I mean. For me, as I said, I think he hit the ground running with this, and so did RTD. Absolutely brilliant. So, what are everybody's opinions on that episode? Are you a fan? And while you are giving you our answers there, I'll just say hello to a couple of people that are in the chat. So we have Shelly, we've got Pitbull Gaming 66, we got Chris, we've got Danielle, we got Michael in the chat as well. We got Bad Wolf 66 and Dave Travels Through Time, Channel 2. We've got the legend that is Daniel. We got Raymond Williams in the chat as well. Who else? We've got the third Doctor in the chat. Renee in the chat. We've got John in the chat. We got Sick Nicks in the chat as well. Welcome. We got Philip Archer in the chat. Chris, our head mod, is in the chat. Welcome, Chris. Yeah. So Pitbull game in '66 on Rose says Rose was a great opening. It was, and I thought the second episode was a great episode as well. RTD takes a gamble, showing the mad alien world of Doctor Who. It was out there for the time. I enjoyed it, but the reviews weren't great. Fortunately, the ratings were, says Raymond Williams. Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you can, as we've always said, look, you can have ratings. Everybody, not ratings, you can have reviews, right? But at the end of the day, reviews are just opinions of those journalists or whoever is reviewing the episode. At the end of the day, the audience will tell the people that are running the show whether their show is good or not, and that reflects in the ratings. This is why I've never got this whole argument about ratings don't mean that anymore. Of course they do. Of course they do. If you don't have good ratings, then what's the point of having the show? You're not making money if the show has low ratings. That's how they make money. If the show is successful, is high in the ratings, then there's more merchandise to be sold. You can then do spin-offs of these shows and make even more money. So I've never gotten this whole thing where ratings don't matter. Ratings matter. Yes, they do. Absolutely. Yeah, in fairness, the CGI in episode two is not too bad either. You've got to remember that it was back in 2005, so they did um they did very well. End of the World is better than Rose, I reckon. Memorable story. Yeah, I would agree. I thought it got better after it got better. Actually, it got look, the first episode, Rose, a solid episode. I think from then on, then he upped the game. End of the World was the show going all out with their CGI effects. Philip Archer says, I was miffed that Paul McGann didn't kick off 2005 Doctor Who, then pulling Christopher Eccleston. Yeah, I have to say, at the time, I was a bit gutted for Paul McGann, but I could kind of understand why he did go with Christopher Eccleston. Um, And I have to be honest, when I heard he was leaving, because I remember in the interviews, he was saying things like, "Well, I've recorded enough for two series," because he was using the old way of doing things, 20-minute episodes. And he basically says, "Well, I've filmed two series," and then it obviously came out that he was leaving, and then he was doing interviews, but he was already putting the narrative out there because he'd already knew he was being replaced. The fact of the matter is, they never told him, he was being replaced, which was the thing. He just didn't commit, because he knew there were problems behind the scenes, and he did have a few issues with a few people behind the scenes. So I think that's why he never committed to the second series, even though he probably was signed up for three. But then obviously it fell apart. And remember, he was going through issues in his own life, in his own personal life at the time as well. I can understand all that. What I can't understand is he's still to this day, you know, there's times, look at, I've had my fair share of rumbles on this platform and on Twitter. I've had falling outs with people, and you know, it's not good. Sometimes, at the end of the day, well, not sometimes, there comes a time where you just have to put the past behind you and move on. Because if you keep thinking about that and keep talking about it, you're never going to fully heal. You're not going to be able to get over it. And that's what I see with Christopher Eccleston at the moment. He just, he's made a few comments. And listen, maybe I have been a little bit unfair on him, because I have read the article. He did call the multi-doctor stories a cash grab. But he did actually say as well that the 50th was better without him. Now, I personally disagree with that, right? I think he would have been a great addition to the 50th. But again, it's because of the past that he had on Doctor Who. and because the way he was treated, I don't think he can. I don't. He hasn't moved on from it, and that's the problem. It's too. Look, I'm not saying he should get over it. Obviously, it was a hurtful thing, and it happened at a time of his life where he was going through a lot, mentally. And I think he also had an eating disorder, if I'm correct as well. I'm not quite sure on that. I'll say alleged eating disorder. So he was going through a lot, and so was Billy Piper as well. Remember, she also was going through difficult times, her marriage as well. So the fact that they were able to pull together and produce the series that they did is quite amazing to me. He'll always get credit for being. Look, if he hadn't have succeeded as the Doctor, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about it, because it could have went all pear-shaped with the Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor. A lot of people at the time didn't think he was a good comedy actor or could pull it off. When people saw his costume, a lot of us weren't happy actually with the costume, because it wasn't like a kind of traditional Doctor Who costume. So there was, you know, these fans today talk about, how Doctor Who fans are negative because the Doctor happens to be female. Well, Christopher Eccleston got his fair share of criticism back in 2005, and when RTD was announced as showrunner, he also got a bit of kickback and backlash. It happens in fandoms, but he let his work do the talking. Christopher Eccleston let his acting do the talking, and he won Doctor Who fans over pretty quick. Right, let's read some more of these comments. Christopher Eccleston has been a right clown these days. Shame. Really like this one hidden gem. Develops Rose and Nine's chemistry. Good villain, and it has tainted Love playing during the episode Deadly Song. Yeah, I do love Tainted Love as well. If ratings didn't count anymore, why are so many shows cancelled because of low ratings? Sometimes my brain hurts. LOL. I know Pitbull Game in '66. The logic. Do you know what? Sorry, I'll rephrase. All logic has gone out the window, mate. Mate, when it comes to ratings and it comes to all the other stuff that comes with it, logic's gone out the window. You know. It's the same stuff over the last 5 years, though. I mean, they can't come up with art new, And look at whether they like it or not, right? People on our so-called side of the fandom called this 5 years ago, and it's all played out exactly the way we said it would play out. I take no satisfaction, or none of us take any satisfaction in saying that. At the end of the day, Doctor Who has been damaged with the public. The perception of Doctor Who now is not one of a great sci-fi show anymore. It's become a laughingstock. Right? That's the damage that has been done. Whether you agree with a female casting as the Doctor or not, that argument now is null and void. Right? You've got to look at all of the facets and why the show failed. And the biggest one is because of the showrunner. You can say what you want about Jodie Whittaker, right? You can have your opinion on her, whether you think she's a good actress, a bad actress, or whatever. Doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, Chris Chibnall's the one that made those decisions. And, look at the state of the ratings now. 2 million live watch Eve of the Daleks, apparently. Now, as I said, I don't actually even believe 2 million watched, because, a lot of people would have switched channel and then they go back then when the Strictly. See, you've got to look at it this way, right? This is how BBC manipulate the ratings. They sandwich Doctor Who in between the most two popular shows either side, right? With Country File and then the Strictly results, right? So what happens is you'll have some older people watching Country File, right? And they won't necessarily switch channels straight away. They'll probably go make a cup of tea or do whatever, right? You leave it on for a certain amount of time, that counts as a view for Doctor Who, right? Once Doctor Who starts playing. It's the same thing then when Strictly, the results come in. Some people will turn on the channel early. They'll go and do whatever they're going to do before they sit down to watch Strictly, and then that counts as a view as well. So in reality, 2 million live viewers is not a true representation. There was less than 2 million live people watching Doctor Who's Eve of the Daleks. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this all out. I've done this for 5 years now, and I think I'm pretty good at the way things go now. I have a grasp of it now. I know how things work with ratings. I know how the live views work. It's not that hard. And it's actually sad because, again, none of us wanted the show to be in this position. But there you go. Choices were made that were not made right. CGI was still sort of in its infancy back then. It was. And I have to say, you have to give big credit to the people behind it. I think it was introduced. I think it was to introduce a new Doctor to a new generation. If they got McGann in it, that would have confused a lot of the audience. Then to go with a regeneration early on, yeah, I can understand that's exactly the reason I would say is the most valid there, because I think that's what would have been the reasons of not casting McGann. Bad Wolf, I'd love to see a spin-off series with McGann, or maybe the 60th anniversary will focus on 5 new Doctors will get involved with the Time War. I could see it in action-packed. Well, there is talk of, obviously, I spoke about it on this channel. So apparently Bad Wolf will produce an animation with Paul McGann leading with some old companions and villains. But again, it's only rumor and speculation. So don't, as I say, take that with a pinch of salt. But again, I'll ask some of you in there, would that be good enough for you? I still think I'd love to see him on a live show, to be quite honest with you. Hopefully RTD will give us new spin-offs. I hope so too. A unit spin-off would be nice. Romana spin-off, if RTD could bring her back. Says Shelley. Rachel Mullins is also in the chat. Say hello. There's no logic anymore, says Pitbull Gaming 66. The show needs redemption, says Bad Wolf 66. For me, I'm intrigued by what costume 14 will sport, whether it's male or female. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff to come. I've just noticed that the Ninth Doctor didn't get along with Jackie and Mickey. Yeah, completely agree, Noel. No matter how they spin, this era has failed, says Rachel. You're right. It's the showrunner and the lack of control over writers that has caused this drop. Exactly, Pitbull Game in 66. I will admit that I did, in the early days, focus a lot on Jodie Whittaker, but I mean, she didn't help the situation. And look, at the end of the day, I am a YouTuber and I do have very strong opinions. And when she did do interviews that, I thought were absolute rubbish, I did call her out. But, I refocused and very quickly became clear where the problems lay. And the problems lay solely on Chris Chibnall. I don't know what the hell. Listen, even Flux now, I'm thinking back, and I'm kind of thinking, what the hell was he trying to do there? I mean, imagine after that drops, you go on to the YouTube official Doctor Who channel, and then it's Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker trying to explain to the audience what Flux was all about. Well, if you're not doing that in the series, right? If you're not developing the story and developing the characters, right? Well, then you're not doing your job properly. If you have to go on and do a 15-minute video to explain to your audience what Flux is all about, well, then, as I said, you failed. Um, I haven't even watched Eve of the Daleks. Neither has Cheryl. And it's the first time that she actually hasn't. It's taken her this long. She doesn't even know if she'll even watch now. I want to know how Gallifrey was destroyed by just the Master. Oh, there's so many questions with the Chibnall era. Look, to be quite honest, when RTD era starts, I'm gonna forget about this, but I'm pretty sure there'll be YouTubers out there that will focus on this era when the new era begins and analyze the Chris Chibnall era. And I'm pretty sure, there'll be a change of tune from some out there, and they'll actually really come out and criticize him because look, he deserves the criticism. He shouldn't be praised for baiting his audience, for pandering, for developing characters poorly, for giving Jodie Whittaker the raw end of a stick. Yeah, yes, to me, she has a lot of flaws. I didn't think she was the right actress for the role. Don't think an actress should play the Doctor. That's a personal opinion. But if they wanted to go down that route, that's fine, fair enough. I would have got a different actress. And that's just my opinion. Want to make that clear. If they wanted to go down that route, that's fine. I don't personally agree with it, but I would have seen what happened. Well, I did because I watched this era. But if they had got a different actress in, maybe, well, things wouldn't have been different though, because you still had the problem. You still had Chris Chibnall in charge. So we probably will never know what a great female doctor would have been like, because I do believe that this era has probably ruined it now, right now anyway, for another woman to take over. Now, I know the other side are hoping and praying that that happens, but that's not going to happen. And they have to face the reality of the situation. You're going to get a traditional doctor, and you're going to get a female companion, maybe another companion if you are lucky, and that's the way it'll be. Right, well, let's you're not allowed opinions, says Pitbull Gaming 66. I know, that's why I had to keep saying it's my opinion, but you are right. The Space Book says, evening all, welcome. We got CD in the chat as well. Welcome, 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 welcome. And Noel, him making a video to explain what the flux is about is something Hollywood producers have been doing, although Hollywood does it by selling books to fill in the plot holes. Well, again, you shouldn't be really doing that. You should be doing it on the series or the movies that you're trying to do it on. That's what good storytellers and actually good writers do. Well, the great writers. But let's move on to the next episode. So we had the end of the world. Yes, and do you know what? Another thing as well, that I was very, very good at. We go to quizzes, and there would be a few Doctor Who questions. Not many, I have to say, but there would be some. But I used to be able to basically roll all of these episodes all the way up to season 4, um, off by heart, every single episode in order, without making a mistake. Obviously, I can't do that now, but I used to be able to. It was. That's what I said. I was obsessed back then. Really, actually, obsessed with Doctor Who. Um, you hit the nail on the head, but we're lacking in good storytellers these days. Exactly, exactly. I heard the timeless child was Tectoyum all along. No, 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 that's not what happened. No, but Tectoyum was the only person that could tell the Doctor exactly what was going on, and Chibs, in his wisdom, decided to kill her off. So now we've got a fob watch, which I'm not going to get into. Seriously, man. I'm still baffled. Right, so obviously the next episode we had, which Lee has suggested is a good Halloween, an episode to watch on Halloween, and I would have to agree with him. It's obviously the Unquiet Dead, and it's the first time we meet Gwen, of course, or Gwen's ancestor, and obviously they go back to Cardiff in 1869. And obviously, they're going to see the great Charles Dickens. Again, for me, I absolutely loved this story. Up until that point, for me, right, that was my favourite episode. I just thought every week this show was getting better and better and better. And look, the ratings kind of prove it. So you've got 10.81 million tuned in for Rose. Now it did dip to 7.97 in the second episode, The End of the World. But then we got 8.86 million watching. Now, I also want to actually draw your attention to the AI at the time. So when Doctor Who first started with Rose, it had an AI of 76. Right? Now, obviously for a new show, that wasn't a bad start. 76 for the second one. But by the third episode, it had jumped to 80. Right? So the AI was 80. Right? The next episode, the AI is 82, by the way, and that was Aliens of London. Now, I don't like Aliens of London and World War III. Now, don't get me wrong. The story was great. I just didn't like the pig in the suit. I didn't like the other aliens. The Slovene, I can never say their names properly. Slovene, right? I didn't like them. I thought they were a bit of a joke, and the old fart and gag kind of got a bit boring, you know. But yeah, I didn't really like them. But again, the AI was 82 for the first one. Now it did drop one with World War III because I didn't think it was that bad, and the AI dropped down to 81. But let's see what it was. If there's a few comments about the Charles Dickens stories were New Who connected to classic Who for me by going back in time. I really got into New Who after that, says Bobby. Yeah, I did. I have a soft spot for the long game. We'll get to those episodes. We're doing them in order. But Rachel, thanks for telling me that one as well. And I do agree with you. Actually, I do like the long game myself. I didn't like the Slovene or the space pig. I thought that was a very, very poor jokey. Yeah, I didn't like it myself. But the next episode, obviously, we had was Dalek, and while a lot of people would say that Doctor Who had established itself, this was a story that probably wouldn't have happened. Because for some of you that don't know, obviously right up until production, they didn't know if they had secured the Daleks for Doctor Who. Obviously they were asking permission from the Terry Nation estate, and there was negotiations going on. Obviously it wasn't smooth, but they got there in the end. For people that don't know, the the what you call it, the villains in Series One were supposed to be um the villains that were in Series 3 with David Tennant and the Master, the future humans. What were they called again? With the balls with the shooty arrow things. What were they called again? Oh, some of you will know what I'm talking about. Um, but they were supposed to be the villains originally for Christopher Eccleston's series. It was going to be a serious long arc, actually. The Toclafane, that's who, yeah. So the Toclafane were supposed to be the villain, but they secured the Daleks. So obviously, again, if you think about it, though, right, and I don't think anybody has really thought about this, but if you think about it, right up until they were ready to go, RTD would have had all these stories written, right? Not knowing whether he'd secured the Daleks or not. And then eventually they got the Daleks right at the end. Yeah. And he was able to change the story completely and make it about the Daleks instead of the Toclafane. Like, I don't think he gets credit for that either. Like, I mean, that was amazing to hear that he was literally able to turn scripts over and maybe tweak them to suit his Dalek story. Like, that's amazing to me. But Dalek, for me, the iconic scene in that is obviously when Eccleston's doctor goes into the room and he's there to help because Henry Van Slatten has obviously been torturing this Dalek, but he doesn't know it's a Dalek, so he's going in with the sympathy and saying, you know, he's a stupid human, basically, he doesn't understand. And then when he says his name is the doctor, and you get the famous scene where the lights come on, and then you hear the Dalek say, Doctor. That was just, listen, that was a goosebump moment for me. Um, and again, still to this day, that is still one of the best New Who episodes. It's up there. That reveal was awesome, Rachel. I agree. Um, absolutely fantastic. Look, RTD was hitting his stride right there with that story. And you know, it's still, seriously, it's still one of me favorites. To see that kind of crazy Daleks as well, you know, was good to see. Dalek, what it was. I was 10. Dalek was when 10-year-old Scottish Stavros realised he was going to become a long life fan, says the legend. Dalek is an 8 out of 10, says Shelley. I'd actually go further, Shelley, and say I think Dalek's a 10 out of 10. I think the humour, even though it was quite oblique, excuse me, even though it's quite a weak, even though it's quite a, a bleak episode, is what I was trying to say, not weak, bleak episode, it still had its moments of humour, which I thought were done very well. Your man that was playing Henry Van Slatten obviously was great. The only part I didn't like about it was Adam. Didn't like Adam from when he was introduced anyway. Um, Obviously, for anybody that doesn't know, he was also in Coronation Street for years, and he was a bit of a twat in that. So I suppose, you know, I probably was never going to warm to him in Doctor Who. But that was the only part I didn't like. But I liked everything else. But yeah, it was good. I thought Dalek was really great. A Dalek is great. Unfortunately, it overpowered a single Dalek. That future episodes make them look a pale imitation of the ruthless killer. 10 out of 10. Michael says, then I was a wee. I thought the Doctor and the Daleks are all aliens, not enemies. Yes, Adam, I didn't like him in Dalek. Dalek is a 10 and Briggs gives me chills. I agree. I agree. I think Nicholas Briggs was great in that episode in particular, um, voicing the Daleks. Um, Adam was a plonker, says the legend. I agree, mate. He just annoyed me. So obviously, the AI for that, by the way, just to let you know, was 84. So it jumped from 81 to 84, right? So you can see the impact that that episode actually had. And remember, the 8.63 are obviously overnights. They're not consolidated figures, by the way. And if you look at the consolidated figures, they're staggering. The next episode, obviously, we had was the long game, which I think Rachel brought up. And again, Satellite 5, uh, which, you know, kind of reflects what's happening today, doesn't it? With the whole media, packaging it, the propaganda, just, letting people, the news media basically controlling the government's controlling what we know, you know, and how it's packaged and framed and stuff like that. But I did like this episode, the Jaguar Fest. Obviously, the CGI doesn't really hold up as good, but I thought the Jaguar Fest was a good idea. And of course, we did have wasn't Simon Pegg was in that episode as well, and then you had Adam being the selfish little twat that he is, trying to basically, you know, he goes to the future and thinks, all he thinks of is pound signs all of a sudden, and then he tries to basically send himself a message back in the past to try and make some money from these things. So I didn't like Adam. Adam was selfish, and I'm glad at the end Rose dumped his ass. To be quite honest, and I'm glad he ended up with a you know clicking the finger and the head would open up, right? Because that's what he deserved for being selfish. Um, but yeah, I actually really did like that episode. Now, 8 million people, just over 8 million people watched that one, and it did drop three in the AI, so from 84 to 81, and then again, obviously, the next episode after that is look. This next episode, right? If we didn't have Dalek in this series, this for me is probably the best episode of the series. Now, I know that's going to be controversial, right? Because we do have the empty child and the Doctor dances next, but I'll get into that. But the next episode, Father's Day, for me, is a great episode. Now, it is written by Paul Cornell. Um, but it is a great story. Let's be honest about it. It is. So Rose, this is a moment where the Doctor kind of gets a little bit angry because he believes Rose to be selfish. And I've said this about Rose loads of times. While she is a lot of people's favorite companion because she is the first companion of New Who, Rose was a very selfish companion. I mean, you look at the way she treated Mickey Smith, for example. And this is another example here. She was only thinking about herself. Now, unfortunately, when Rose was a baby, her father passed away. Now, when the Doctor in the very first episode asked her if she'd like to travel through space, right? She said that she'd stay. But then the Doctor comes back and tells her, "Did I also tell you that we can travel through time?" And then she decides to go with him. right? And I knew this was going to probably bite the doctor in the ass at some stage, and that's exactly what happened. And look, I will say this: if we all had a time machine and we could go back and save family members, we'd probably all do what she did, right? There's no denying that. But it does show a side, and then after the doctor feels like he's being betrayed by Rose, he still tries to save them all. And more importantly, because of the change that Rose has made, he wants to try do it in a way that will bring her father back into her life. After all she's done, he decides that he's going to try change it. But of course, Pete steps up to the mark. Pete is a bit of a jack the lad, you know. He's had all these mad ideas, and of course, as you know, he isn't successful, and he's been accused of cheating and stuff like this. And it's an interesting dynamic watching Jackie and and Pete Tyler. Jesus, why am I forgetting these names? Pete Tyler. It's an interesting dynamic, but our dad, in the end, he says, "Look, I'm not all these things that you think I am, but I'm gonna do this one thing for you." And it was quite sweet, and it is sad when he passes away. But it's a great episode, and the doctor has that moment with the couple, and he asks them how they meet and stuff like that, and it's that side of RTD that I love, the human side, where he's able to bring these, he's basically able to recreate everyday ordinary people out there and translate them onto screen and people that we can connect to. Absolutely brilliant. This is why I'm excited for him to come back, because he understands the show and he understands characters and he understands society and he understands human nature. Father's Day just didn't sit well with me, subject wise, as Philip was. Father's Day might be my favourite. Sean Dingwall as P was incredible, great performance. You can't change the past because it causes a paradox, says Shelley. He was a bit of a Del boy, I agree. Her dad being the hero was the perfect ending, I agree, Raymond. I think Father's Day is a single set as Doctor Who episodes, says Danielle. She was selfish. She bailed on Mickey whenever she felt like it. She made the Doctor take Adam with them when he didn't want to. Doctor Who controversial of the Daleks. Father's Day is emotional. However, Reapers should have shown up more times by now. How many times has time been rewritten now? Mickey would cling to the nearest blonde was one of the famous lines in that as well. Father's Day is faultless. It's a sad episode, says Shelley. Great argument between the Doctor and companion. Father's Day, I would give an 8 out of 10, says John. Father's Day out of 10. You don't have to give a rating, but if you feel like he's wanted, then that's fine. I will read it out. The only dud of the series for me, I find boring. That was the comments on the long game. Paul Cornell wrote this dialogue, but dialogue is pure RTD. He's all over this episode, and a heartbreaking episode there. Obviously, then we had the empty child and the Doctor dances. Now, for me, World War II obviously doesn't have the same impact as it would for the British people, because yous lived through it. Obviously, our country was neutral. Now, obviously, we weren't. we weren't left alone. Unfortunately, we were hit a couple of times, but not as, but nothing compared to what your country went through. Your island went through. Absolutely horrifying. To have a two-part episode during the London Blitz, I thought was a brave move for RTD that paid off absolutely. I love the empty child and the doctor dances. I think it's creepy. Um, but also, you know, again, things that you don't learn in school. For example, all the kids, our kids were moved down to the country to keep them away from the cities and stuff like that. And some of them were being abused, and they'd come back to the war zone. Basically, I never knew that. So again, when it came to RTD creating a story within a piece of history, he's the man to do it. And the empty child, I thought, was a great concept. They were dropping bombs all over London. You know, and the fact that he was able to uh, intertwine a story with the nanogenes, and you know basically you've got Nancy, and you've got her, then she's lost a child but you don't know, and this child happens to be the one that you my mummy, but she doesn't quite she knows that it's her kid basically, but nobody else does. And look, it's again, Jordan, horrific, part of world history that the poor British people were involved in. It's it's it was just, I didn't honestly, I didn't think he could do it. To be quite honest, it's World War II is a very sensitive subject. Um, but you know what I mean. I think the iconic scene in that is Rose Tyler hanging off, hanging onto a rope with the Union Jack splattered across our bloody our t-shirt, and then she falls, and then Captain Jack, and again we got introduced to a new character in Captain Jack, and John Barrowman, obviously the actor, as you all know, and let's be honest, we all fell in love with Captain Jack. Bit of a rogue, and the running joke in that was, Rose asking the doctor, "Would you not give me a bit of, the bit of the sci-fi, the Spock?" Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's still one of me favorite two parters. Actually, there's not many two parters that I really like. To be quite honest with you, especially in the Moffat era, but we won't get into that now. But yeah, I did like that two-parter, I have to say. And again, the resolution at the end, but this is what started all this, fairy tale nonsense that we were going to get then in the Moffat era. Because if I'm correct, Stephen Moffat wrote these two episodes, and everybody lives, Roll. Just this once, everybody lives. I get why he gave it a happy ending, but unfortunately, war isn't a happy ending. There is real tragedy. But he did show, in fairness though, he was um he was tackling a very sensitive topic. And I suppose a kid did die, and obviously those nanogenes couldn't figure out what part was human, and they turned into these gas mask people. So there was real tragedy there. But yeah, I think that two-parter is brilliant. Nancy was great. We should say the supporting cast was great. First time introduced to, obviously, John Barrowman. And I do have to say, every time you see in one of these cast members, "Are you my mummy?" And then all of a sudden they change. I thought the doctor changing that he went to see, the ninth doctor, what was his name again? Um, I forget the name of the doctor that he went to see, but your man from One Foot in the Grave um, played the doctor. And he goes and sees him. When he changes, I thought, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. I have to say the CGI was brilliant. That is a good two-parter, I have to say. Um, the actress playing the young mother retired from acting. Pity because she was great in this. Jack is a nice addition to the TARDIS family. I think Captain Jack Harkness is based on Stephen Taylor from Doctor Who from the original series. Yeah, I love this two-parter. Um, scared the crap out of me. This two-parter gave me nightmares for weeks after, but awesome episode. Nancy could have been a great companion if was kept on. And JB's debuts. Yeah, she could have been a great, actually. She could have been a great companion. I do agree with you. Yeah, the scene with Richard Wilson changes is one of the highlights. I do agree. I love the Doctor and Rose said Captain Jack at the last moment. RTD did two parters brilliantly. Yeah, it scared me too as a kid, says Rachel. Um, I mean, yeah. Look, again, kids. You know, they talk about episodes being scary nowadays. I disagree. I I think they're afraid nowadays to scare kids. You know, whereas back in 2005, you know, even RTD was he was accused of some of the episodes being a little bit too scary for kids, but kids were still watching them. That's the thing. So I mean, for me, I don't think it's a bad thing to scare the kids. It's supposed to scare you. You know, those classic kills scared the crap out of me growing up. Supposed to scare you. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything to you. If anything, it makes you less scared of things outside. I have to be. If I'm honest about it, it did with me. Obviously, affect other people differently. So obviously, we had Boomtown next. Oh, by the way, I never gave you the AI for those two. So the AI. So again, the empty child. So remember, Father's Day got 83 in the AI. The empty child got 84 in the AI, but then the Doctor Dances got 85. So then next we had Boomtown, and obviously this is connected to aliens in London, World War III. So one of the family managed to escape and became mayor of Wales. And obviously, this mayor decided that they were going to build a nuclear power plant. And obviously, it was designed in a way that when it reached full capacity, it would basically go into meltdown and would cause a nuclear reaction. Um, so obviously, the doctor Jack and Rose land Cardiff, and of course, Rose summons Mickey to Cardiff to bring her passport, even though she doesn't need it. But then she says, "Well, I only asked you to bring it down because I missed you." But then later on, then she gets jealous when she finds out Mickey might be actually seeing someone, and she starts arguing with him and stuff like that. And I'm kind of like thinking to myself, so hang on for a minute. You went off with a strange bloke. You traveled through time and space. You bumped into another bloke. You brought him along. You didn't give a crap about your boyfriend then. Then you bumped into Jack. And then you were flirting with Jack like mad. And then 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 you start giving out then because Mickey might be seeing someone. But then it turns out that it was only a rumor because he basically wanted attention from you. So, like, again, as I said, Rose is very selfish. I could do a whole video on Rose, actually. as a companion. Very selfish companion. But obviously they have to stop this mare. And there is a few funny moments in it where the doctor is using isn't he using the reverse on the earring that she's using as a teleporter, and then then you do have the very serious issue. Obviously the TARDIS has to stay there and refuel at the rift. So that gives the doctor 24 hours. So the police box actually does become a police box, and there's an interesting dynamic between the doctor and obviously the Slovene woman and Margaret. And, it does really, she basically says, can you actually look into me eyes? You're bringing me home to be executed. And you could see them all in the TARDIS turn, not looking at her and stuff like that. So it does get real pretty quick. I do like this episode, and I have to say, I think the reason why I do is because of the actress that's playing Margaret. And there's not much of the big alien in it, the Sylvian. I can't say it properly, so that's why I'm not even attending. Uh, so I'm glad it's the actress, but there is an interesting dynamic between herself and the doctor, which I find quite interesting. So that was a solid episode. Then by the end, then Margaret gets a second chance at life because she's turned back into an egg. So the doctor says, "Well, I'll give her to a good family that'll raise her up the right way, and let's hope she can turn out different." Basically, but there was that moral dilemma there that the doctor did face, and in the end, she looked into the heart of the TARDIS, but and then obviously she reverted back to an egg. And Mickey then again gets dumped again because she doesn't give a crap. Now, in fairness, she does go looking for him, and Mickey sees that, but I think he's just fed up at that stage, and he's like, "Well, screw this, I'm out of here." Sort of attitude, and he was right. He was right. It's there is that realization with him in series two, which we're going to get into now in a second. So we had Boomtown, then we had Bad Wolf and the Parting of Ways. So obviously this is the game show one. So you got the weakest link, the Big Brother. I did like the intro to this actually, where the doctor sits on the Big Brother couch, and then he realizes he's actually on Big Brother. I thought it was very good, and I did like the android. I did like this episode. Jack was a bit cheeky in it, but of course, contestants were. The doctor soon finds out that he thinks that contestants are being murdered uh, in these shows. And obviously, he gets out of the Big Brother house and they go to try save Rose. And of course, he thinks Rose is dead. And, you could see the anger in the doctor, and he's a bit unhinged again because he's lost. He's thought he's lost a companion. And you know what? The end of this episode, that cliffhanger right at the end where he says, where he's talking to the Daleks, he says, "No, I'm going to go right into the heart of the and I'm going to rescue her, and then wipe." Doesn't he say, "I'm going to wipe every single last one of you," whatever the line is? That cliffhanger. Look at, man. When that cliffhanger, I was like, "Oh my god, you absolute! Oh, can't wait a week." A week? Are you serious? We have to wait a week? That was a great cliffhanger. But seriously, I couldn't wait a week. Man, I was looking for anything that I could read that give me a hint of what was going to happen. But look, we met Linda. Did we meet Linda was it Linda with a Y? And poor Linda dies. She could have made a good companion as well. But again, Rose showed a bit of jealousy there, and anytime Eccleston's doctor did talk to another woman, you could see that, Rose was getting jealous. I mean, she's nothing to be jealous about. I mean, she's dumped her own boyfriend. She's brought straight. She's went off with him in the first place. Then she's brought another strange bloke on. Then she flirts with Captain Jack, and she's still like, acting like this again. I could do a whole video on Rose, but we won't go there. um, but yeah, Bad Wolf. I have to be honest. I did like the cliffhanger. Um, but the partner ways. Look, partner ways for me is a mixed bag. Because I've never really liked Rose absorbing the heart of the TARDIS. Again, she's being selfish. The doctor tried to save her life, and she just couldn't stay at home. And again, she breaks Mickey's poor heart because Mickey can clearly see that she's not going to give up on this endeavor of trying to save the doctor. So he basically says, "Feck, I'm going to try help," and then he uses his little mini, and obviously that doesn't work. And then Jackie and her have a blowout, and Rose reveals that I met Dad, and then Jackie doesn't believe her, and she goes, "Mom, think the girl that was with him, that was me," and Jackie can't. You think Jackie can't accept, and she runs out. Then obviously she comes back with wherever his name, Rodrigo or whatever, his bleeding recovery truck, and then she latches a chain onto the center console and obviously tries to rip it open, and she succeeds, and yeah, then she absorbs all that energy, and obviously the TARDIS goes back. But yeah, it's revealed. By the way, I forgot. Anyway, yeah, that was the Rose part of it, but I did actually forget. So it turns out that the Daleks actually weren't killing the humans in these game shows. They were transporting them onto the Dalek mothership, if I'm correct. And basically what they were doing is they were basically genociding all these humans to try get a cell that they could use basically to become nurture, to become Dalek. But the thing about these Daleks, they hated themselves because obviously they had that human DNA, no matter how minuscule it was. They actually detested themselves, which made them even worse, to be quite honest with you. And, they were obviously worshipping the Emperor of the Daleks, the God of all Daleks. I always wanted, actually, just to kind of go off topic a little bit, but merchandise-wise, I've always wanted that God of all Daleks model. I don't know if they ever. I think they did bring one out years and years ago, but I haven't seen them around. But that looks like a pretty good thought. I'd love that. But yeah, these are mad Daleks. But what you call it? Obviously, see, for me, I didn't like the resolution. Rose comes out with the TARDIS and she saves everything and turns everything back. I thought it was. I have to admit, I did think it was a bit of a cop out at the time. And again, when we finish Peter Capaldi's era, we will be looking back at the RTD era. So again, when we have a panel on, we'll give our views and we'll let you know what we actually are feeling about that. So when she was willing to sacrifice herself to save his life and Jack because they had saved her. Yeah. In fairness, you do make a good point there, but at the end of the day, I don't think she should have went, but there you go. That's just me. Um, but look, you're right though. If she hadn't have done it, we wouldn't have got another bloody series, would we? So I suppose uh, it had to happen. But I don't know. I just thought the resolution was, look, while it was kind of clever to use that in a way, the heart of the TARDIS consuming all that time vortex energy. You know, fair enough, but it didn't sit well with me. That's all I'm just going to say. But look, again, obviously, the result of that was poor Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor regenerates, and we are introduced to David Tennant. And we can move on. Now, I'm going to try to go faster through these now than we did with the first one. Reason why I gave Christopher Eccleston a little bit more time and talked about him a little bit more is because he did do one series. Now, we've got to remember that uh, the next Doctor has obviously done 3 full series, and he did those 3 specials as well. So we have a lot to talk about. So we'll just breeze through them anyway. So the first episode we were at. Now, I will say this. When Eccleston did regenerate into David Tennant, and David Tennant spoke about obviously his teeth and stuff like that, and his hair, and obviously then, you know, I have to be honest, first impressions, I wasn't really impressed. I actually thought, oh man, they've got the guy from Casanova. Are you serious? For anybody that doesn't know, that was a show that was on the BBC, and David Tennant played the lead. Now, if you're into shows like that, that's fine, fair enough. But obviously, Casanova is not my cup of tea. But I thought, oh, Jesus, man, the Casanova actor. And I have to be honest, his first scene in the TARDIS, I wasn't really impressed. I was gutted over Eccleston. I to be quite honest with you, I don't think I'd gotten over Eccleston when David Tennant had came along. It just felt very rushed to me anyway. But that all changed when I watched the Christmas Invasion. And that was the first time properly. Well, again, that's debatable really, because he hardly features in the episode. So obviously the Doctor has regenerated and the TARDIS is out of control, but somehow it locks back to Rose Tyler's estate. Mickey is working in his garage. It's around Christmas. It's Christmas time. The music is playing. Jackie can hear the TARDIS as well. They both run down, and then the TARDIS appears and it's bouncing off buildings, and then it finally crash lands, and then out pops David Tennant. And I will say his first few lines are actually great, because he's trying to think of what he wants to say, and he wants to say Merry Christmas, isn't it? And then he collapses. And then, of course, then Rose is kind of gutted because Christopher Eccleston, the Night Doctor, has changed into this guy, and she's devastated. And, that is interesting to see it from the companion's point of view, though, to see the Doctor, especially for New Who viewers, to see how a companion can adapt. So obviously, we had seen it before, but this was the first time for New Who. And I say it would have been a pretty dramatic change. Remember, a lot, and it was a gamble as well. See, this is the thing. People don't realise, Christopher Eccleston did a one series, right? Now, could have went all pear-shaped, because as I said, again, which these newer fans don't realise, right? Or these Jodie stands or bots, whatever you want to call them, they don't realise, when David Tennant was cast as well, there was a backlash to his casting. People weren't impressed with his first scene. He won a lot of people over in the Christmas Invasion. Still, there were still people that were waiting until they saw Series 2 to make up their minds. But this could have all went pear-shaped for RTD. To do what he did, bring the show back, and then to lose the Doctor after one series, and then to introduce us with a second Doctor straight away. That was a gamble, and it was a gamble that paid off. But I do like the Christmas Invasion, and obviously the Christmas, excuse me, The Christmas Invasion was the very first Christmas special. So it started the trend. Now 9.84 million watched, and the AI was 84 for the Christmas Invasion. But when he finally, there are a couple of scenes in it. I mean, when he wakes up for the first time and he's telling them about what's to come, when he realizes what's happening, and then the music changes as well, and then he collapses. Jackie, I mean, the scenes with Jackie are funny as well. Asking him what he wants, what does he need, and stuff like that. It's a hilarious scene. But and I mean, listen, I think even though all that happens, I think the most iconic scene in that is the Christmas tree, where Jackie says, "I'm gonna be killed by a Christmas tree." I mean, that's just. I mean, if we get moments like that again in this upcoming RTD era, I'll be happy. Obviously, we had oh yeah, Harriet Jones was the prime minister. Yeah, because Harriet Jones does something, which she makes up for, which we all know how she makes up for that. She makes up for it with her life. Um, but I did like Harriet Jones. Um, Look, it's the Christmas Invasion. I love that Christmas special. I still do. It's one of my favorites. And David Tennant, every scene he was in, the more he kept waking up and till he's his reveal, his proper reveal, where he comes out of the TARDIS after the tea, basically falls, and that's all he basically needed. But when he comes out of that TARDIS and then just starts opening his mouth, and then he goes up to the blood blood control machine, whatever it is, and then he starts talking about if I see a big red button and all of that line, and he presses the big red button, and then he challenges the Sycorax to a bleeding sword fight. Then he gets his hand chopped off, and then he goes, "This hand's a fighting hand," and then he does the whole, yeah. Look, he won me over. He won me over in that story. That's the story for me. It was make or break for me. That was, to be quite honest with you. I was gutted. I was really gutted when Eccleston left. I was seriously considering not watching again. I was gutted. Um, but I'd become such a fan of the show again that I just couldn't tune out. So it was a good decision in the end, to be quite honest with you, because the Christmas Invasion obviously was very good. Now, the first episode officially of Series 2 that kicked off was New Earth. And obviously, it harped back to a character that was in Series 1. And I thought this was very clever by RTD, actually, to bring an existing character from his first series and bring that character back for Series 2, which was Lady Cassandra. And again, I love New Earth. You've obviously got the cat nuns, the sisters of plenitude, and then of course we meet Lady Cassandra again. And I have to say, the body swap scenes with David Tennant and Rose, or David Tennant and Billy Piper, and people tend to forget. And I'll give her credit for this. Rose Tyler or Billy Piper was obviously fresh to acting, and to be able to do what she did in the second series, I mean, was absolutely amazing. And I thought both of them did the body swap thing brilliantly. Um, of course, what isn't there to like about Cat Nuns? With Claude. I mean, that was a great. I thought that was great. Um, I liked it. I thought it was it was obviously, we artificially grow stuff, and we, we, and animals and stuff, all of that, in the in for scientific research and all of that. So it was an interesting take when RTD basically, did an episode or did a story where you had an alien race that was actually doing that to humans, and then the whole moral dilemma. Well, are they really humans if they can't do this? You know what I mean? So what it was, the episode was, well, what makes a human being, basically, and the doctor, the way he put it, they were early form of human, and they deserved the rights and privileges of us all, basically, and stuff like that. So it was very interesting to see that take, very interesting to see it from that point of view, because, you know, while, look, I'll never stop eating meat, right? That's just the way I am. But there has been questions over the years about how manufacturers, you know, handle their livestock and stuff like that. And we can't ignore that stuff. Where at the end of the day, if you can't kill these animals humanely, well, then you shouldn't be in the business. And I do believe that. But I think, and it's the same with using animals in scientific experiments. So I do think it was again. See, these kids nowadays, they don't. This is why the RTD era was so good. You know, you had the cloning of what was the name of that sheep? Uh, what was the name of the sheep that was cloned? Again, why can't I think of the name of the sheep? Was it Dolly? No. What was the name of the sheep? Anyway, yeah, it was kind of like that, It's interesting. I really did like that story. Um, I did like New Earth. By the way, the Christmas invasion of 84 AI, 85 for New Earth, and we had 8.62 million people tune in for that. But my favorite episode, well, this next episode for me was just mesmerizing, and it was Tooth and Claw. And of course, you had Queen Victoria in it. You also had a werewolf, which and a transformation, which I thought was absolute for the time, especially for the budget that Doctor Who had. I thought was brilliant. Um, but yeah, Tooth and Claw for me, brilliant. David Tennant got to showcase his Scottish accent. Got to play around with that a bit. What isn't there to like about kick-ass monks? Trying to basically bring the era of the werewolf uh, along, which I thought was a great, interesting concept. The whole thing about the telescope, but again, it was partly based on. I'm not going to say it's true story, but there were always rumors around the royal family, because obviously, Queen Victoria had picked up a blood condition, which was baffling to the doctors. What was it, hemophiliac or whatever it was called? I don't forget what it was, but did she get nipped by the werewolf? Is what I've always because they don't specific. She says it was a splinter. I'm not quite sure it was a splinter, but if she got nipped, I think it's great because there's always been a rumor that the royal family scheduled their stuff around the full moon. If you believe in the conspiracy theories, of course. So I thought that was RTD again. You know, again, he would have known this and he played around with it for this episode. And I thought it was very good. Um, and even the guy that plays the werewolf before he turns into the werewolf, where Rose is chained up with the rest of the staff, and he's having that conversation while he's in the cage. I man, seriously, I thought that was brilliant. And I thought for the little kids, they're going to be scared shitless looking at this, right? And the reveal, let's be honest, the reveal and the transformation, you know, like I mean, your man's literally screaming. So like it was great and very realistic. And then when we got to see the werewolf properly, absolutely brilliant. But the house ended up being a trap for the werewolf, and the telescope obviously wasn't really a telescope, it was a weapon against. And they also had that famous diamond uh, as well, which he brought into the episode. So again, you know, RTD very clever using myth and real life situations and trying and incorporating them into a story. I absolutely love Tooth and Claw. And again, I thought, you know what I was thinking, you know, I was like, after Tooth and Claw. No, actually, it was after the next episode is where I was like, Christopher Hill, and that's School Reunion. A School Reunion brings back two familiar characters from the past. And this was a big moment for me. And I say a lot of classic Who fans. This was the episode that was a big moment. And it was for me, it was a watershed moment. And that it's School Reunion. It's Sarah Jane Smith and K9 returning to Doctor Who. And again, you know, so just a recap on the story. So the Doctor is working as a teacher because there's something going on at the school. The kids are very clever. Some kids have gone missing. So he goes undercover as a school teacher, as I said. And then, you know, while he's there, then the principal brings in this journalist who's doing a piece on the principal and the school, but she's really undercover. She's there to obviously investigate if there's some carry on going on behind the scenes. And of course, that woman turns out to be Sarah Jane. And I have to say, genuinely, I heard David Tennant's when she came on because he's a fan. He was smitten, but he was also like, you know, he loved every moment of filming the scenes, and he could see it that genuinely it was like Sarah Jane had never gone away. But of course, you had Rose. She was working undercover as well, but she got the raw end of the stick because she ended up serving chips in the school canteen. And then we got Mickey coming back, and obviously he was the one that put the Doctor and Rose onto this, and he turns out to be right. And obviously there's a funny moment between him and K9 in the car, where he's asking K9 how does he break into the school after the school gets locked down. He goes, "You are in a car. You are," and then Mickey cops on after K9 says that a few times. But again, Rose shows her jealousy. Again, you know, she kind of has a dig at Sarah Jane. Well, he's never mentioned you. You know, yeah, Mickey, while she's eating the chips, Mickey makes the comments, "You want to lay off the chips, love," uh, basically. You wouldn't get away with that line nowadays. You'd probably actually hurt a lot of people's feelings with that comment now. The way society's gone now, we've become all soft little bitches. Everybody cries about everything. You wouldn't get away with that line nowadays. But obviously we get K9 back. And of course the enemy is the Krillitanes, which for me are an absolutely brilliant villain. And when the Doctor is actually given an opportunity to work for the Krillitanes, he could basically bring his own people back, shape the universe the way he wanted. That was the offer that was given to him. It's Sarah Jane that basically convinces him not to take the deal, because she says, she's also hurting that the Doctor did dump her, all those years back, and he never came back. And the Doctor was explaining, well, things happened and blah, blah, blah. But then when it comes to the crunch, she's the voice of reason. She's there and she's like, no, everything has its time and everything has its place. And basically, we must move on. So then he makes the decision then that he's not going to take the deal. And then, of course, all hell breaks loose. And those the Krillitane bats are deadly, man. I love that episode. And then K9 gets the kick ass. And that's what I love about it. K9, and I love the line from the head Krillitane where he's like, kill the shooty dog. Kill the shooty dog. K9 is just, oh man. Seriously, that was, I'm being honest for you. I'm being honest. That episode, even though it wasn't a real emotional episode, I was emotional. Sarah Jane was back. K9 was back. You had great villains. It was just, and the music, and I'm just going to mention the music. For me personally, Murray Gold, that school reunion, the tune where the kids are playing the computer. That music. Seriously, when I got the box set, right, when the box set came out, right, see that episode, right, when that episode came on, I'd watch it, and then when the kids start playing on the computer, I'd jam the volume up, and literally, I'd have my neighbours banging on the bleeding wall, because that music would be playing. Oh man, Murray Gold's music was, and again, we haven't really spoke about Murray Gold's music, but it's a given that his music was actually brilliant. And of course, then he follows it up. Look, Series 2 for me, right? Series 1 was a good solid start. Series 2 is where he upped his game. And there's quite, look at from the Christmas Invasion, right? Then he does New Earth, right? Which is is a good story, but it's not brilliant, right? But Tooth and Claw, then he followed it up with School Reunion. But then he follows it up with The Girl in the Fireplace. And again, this was written by Stephen Moffat. But this is one of my favourite stories. And yet again, Rose is kind of jealous in this episode. Seems to be a running theme with Rose. If people actually analysed Rose Tyler properly, they would see that she was quite a jealous and insecure person. But The Girl in the Fireplace, this is where the Doctor falls in love with Madame de Pompadour. And I don't care what anybody says, he is clearly in love with that woman, right? And look, again, I love this episode. Clockwork Villains. And still to this day, I think they're one of the best designed villains that we've had in New Who. I mean, the Clockwork, very clever, very clever. So the Doctor, so this is Mickey's first official trip on the TARDIS, and they land on a spaceship, and it's obviously it becomes quite clear that something is going on. The engines are all full blast. The Doctor figures out that because that's happened, they've opened up kind of windows in different parts of the ship, basically stalking this woman, and it happens to be Madame de Pompadour. Uh, Obviously, the Doctor goes through the fireplace, and that's where he's introduced to a very young Annette. Is it Antoinette or Annette? Basically, obviously with that, she calls him the fireplace man at the start, but he obviously, because he met her just like the Doctor, Matt's Doctor did with Amy Pond. Obviously, you know, seeing someone as wonderful as the Doctor set an impression on the young girl's life. So obviously, for Madame de Pompadour, as we find out who she is, grows up and has this man called the Doctor, or fireplace man at first, uh, popping in through her life and stuff like that. So it turns out, obviously, we all know the Clockwork people want to basically rip our head off because they need parts. It becomes clear that these Clockwork people have actually basically killed all the staff, the human staff, and they've used their body parts to fix the ship. And they need one more part, and it's the brain of Madame de Pompadour. So the Doctor obviously has to save the day. Now, in this episode, the Doctor was willing to be stuck with Madame de Pompadour. This was the thing, while Rose was waiting. And that scene where Rose is standing there looking, waiting for the Doctor, I think is one of them is one of those iconic moments in Doctor Who, because she knows she might never see the Doctor again. Mickey and Rose basically don't know what they're gonna do from here. And I think there is the one time where I kind of feel a little bit sorry for Rose, but at the same time, Mickey is there, and I can't just help feel, well, like, there's Mickey. Like, he's still here, like Rose. Come on. Hey, now, I'll ever consider doing a watch along of Knight Rider or Hercules, the legendary journeys. If you do, please let me know, as I'm a hardcore fan of both shows, says Sanctuary of Geeks. Well, we got a few going at the moment, but yeah, I'll probably end up doing some classic TV shows at some stage, to be quite honest with you. And yeah, I used to love Knight Rider growing up, to be quite honest with you. And Hercules, yeah, I watched that as well. But yeah, back to what we were talking about. So obviously, the one thing I didn't like about this episode, and it was a Stephen Moffat trait that was coming in pretty early, Jordan. It was a trait that Moffat had. And the moving of the fireplace from the palace in Madame de Pompadour's room when she was a kid to the palace where she ended up staying as the king's mistress, right? Right. The fact that she moved the fireplace or something, it turned the fireplace offline. It was offline, so that's why it didn't break, right? But I always thought, again, that was a little bit of a cop out. Even though, look, I accepted it because, you kind of you wanted the Doctor to get back to the TARDIS, in fairness. But I just found that a little bit of a cop out. But the saddest part of that episode is obviously when the Doctor finally, he's looking for Madame de Pompadour, and he goes through again, and then he sees the king staring out a window, and it's Madame de Pompadour. She's died, passed away, and the king hands her a letter, and obviously he doesn't read it there in front of her, but it was a sad little moment. And then Mickey, then when he comes back to the TARDIS, Mickey realizes that he needs to be on his own, so he gets Rose to show him around. And then, of course, they read out the letter, and it's quite sad. It's quite sad. It's look, it's a lot of fans' favorite episode, and I can see why. It's it's got its funny moments, but it's got a lot of emotional moments as well. And again, it's that human connection that RTD is so good at. This is why this works. But then we get the little reveal at the end as the TARDIS is gone away. It's actually the SS Madame de Pompadour. So the reason why they basically needed our brain, the brain was basically the engine. So basically they needed our brain to be compatible so they could fly the ship. But obviously that didn't happen and the fireplace turns off and we have the music at the end. And it's actually quite a sad episode. But again, you know, improvement every episode. And again, as I said, the AI was 85 there. Now it did drop one to 84, but then we had the two-parter, Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. And then, obviously, for fans, this would have been the first proper introduction for newer fans. The Cybermen. Now, obviously, in the Van Staten episode in Dalek in the previous series, we did see a Cyberman head, but it was an old classic Cyberman head. But for Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel, the TARDIS ends up on a parallel Earth, and on this parallel Earth, Rose, again being the selfish person that she is, she sees that this version of Earth, her dad is alive, and a mom, and they're together, and they're multi-millionaires, and all these little schemes have worked. And obviously you've got rich and poor system. So you've got the rich and the elites living up in their airships, and you've got basically the poorer people living on the ground, basically. So Rose decides, the TARDIS is stuck there, and the Doctor thinks the TARDIS is dead, but then he finds there's a little glimmer of hope, and then he gives away. He blows on it, doesn't he, and gives it his regeneration energy or something. And he said that just took 10 years of my life or something like that, but it was worth it. So they have to let that charge up. So that means then that they have to stay on this parallel universe while the TARDIS is actually basically charging up again. So Rose then decides to get it into her head that she's going to visit Pete and her mother. And basically with that, then Mickey sees that, and then basically he starts to rebel because, as he says to the Doctor, it's always about Rose, it's always about her life, you don't know anything about me and stuff like that. And he decides that he's going to go off and see if his grandmother, because unfortunately on his Earth, his grandmother tripped, fell and broke her neck, and she passed away. So he wanted to see if his parallel version of his grandmother was alive. So then he storms off, then Rose storms off, and then the Doctor has to make a choice who's going to follow. So he gives them a time that they all have to meet up, and then he runs obviously off with Rose. And then in the next scene, then obviously Rose is actually explaining why Mickey basically has run off and done what he's done. And then all of a sudden, there's loads of people around them, and then their earpieces go off, and everybody just stands still. And the Doctor realizes that they get their information downloaded in through this earpiece and blah, blah, blah. And then he realizes that Pete is connected to it somehow, and then agrees then to go to this house to see what the story is. And obviously they use waiter and waitress as their cover, if I'm correct. Well, she's definitely a waitress. I don't know if he was playing a waiter I don't think that, because he just goes off and checks the computer. Then he realizes it's the Cybermen. So Yeah, I've skipped a lot there. Obviously, there's a guy, he's terminally ill, and he's a cybernetics expert, basically, and he wants to create these Cybermen, and the government, the UK government, won't let him do it. So the president, the president this time of the UK, is basically at Jackie Tyler's birthday party, and he gets assassinated by these Cybermen, which the president is basically like saying, "Oh, these poor people, who are they?" And he says they're nobodies, they're the poor, and they're people in society that we don't. But I gave them a purpose, and all of this. And sorry, I forgot. John Lumick is the guy that's sick. So John Lumick is a bit of a lunatic. He's basically dying, and he did this at first, because he was dying, but then he becomes fanatical about it, as what mostly happens to people when they create something new. Anyway, they do become a little bit fanatical. Um, and basically humans are being converted into these forcibly into these, and it's basically the Doctor has to try figure it all out. We meet other characters along the way. So there's Ricky, which is Mickey's counterpart on on this parallel Earth. Ricky and his boyfriend. Forget what his boyfriend's name is, but um, they were obviously, trying to investigate the P of this parallel world. I know it's getting confusing, but basically what happens is Pete ends up being innocent, and he's the one that's sending the information to them. Uh, and a couple of people die as well along the way, and then the Doctor in the end ends up defeating them. But there is one scene I will say in this that is quite distressing. It's the scene where they're being converted, and then they play, isn't it? Don't they play that song in the jungle? Oh no, the lion sleeps tonight, isn't it? Don't they play that song or something in the background while people are getting converted, and you can hear the humans like screaming? But that two-parter for me, great two-parter. Have to say, the only thing I didn't like, and I still don't like them to this day, never have, is the redesign of these Cybermen. And I didn't like the clickety click when they were moving. The stamp. Don't want to be heard in sound effects like that. That was that. Yeah. So I've never really liked the redesign of the Cybermen. But look, it was a good two-parter. Very dark in some places. So that was the Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. Now we got the episode that I can't actually stand, and it's the Idiot's Lantern. Now, good concept, decent enough story. I just couldn't. I'm Hungry Woman, whatever her name is. She just did my head in that whole episode. Yeah, what was her name? So you had Mr. Magpie, obviously. So the Doctor, the Doctor and Rose, I think, are off to see a concert, but they end up in London in 1953, the day before Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. And obviously, when they get there, they witness someone being bungled into the back of a car, and they chase it down on their bike. And there's a comment made. I think this is not England. This is more like Stalin's Russia, or some mad comment like that. And what you call it? Then he starts, basically, him and Rose doing what they always do, investigating. But Rose at the start of this episode figures it out straight away. because she says to the doctor, "Yeah, I remember me nanny saying when they watched the coronation, they all had to sit in each other's houses to watch it because not many people had the television. But when they land, they could see that there's an aerial nearly on every rooftop, every chimney, which wouldn't have been the case back then. So the doctor knows there's something up. So there's this guy, Mr. Magpie. He's the one that's selling the TVs, and he has been basically he's in a lot of debt, and he basically says, "I need a miracle," and then that miracle comes in the shape of the Wire, who then basically controls him and basically tells him that he's got to build these parts so basically she can consume all the humans because she's hungry. All of that crap. Anyway, without going into too much detail, the Wire kills Magpie. The Doctor saves the day. There's a lovely little moment between between what you call it, fucking Rose and the Doctor, where they're at the coronation, and Tommy. I did like Tommy in it. I like the actress that played Tommy. His dad was a lunatic. But great, yeah, great story. And again, it showed the difference between generations. You know, you had a generation that was fighting World War II, and then you had the generation that because of their fathers and their grandfathers fighting for them, they had more freedom. And you know, Tommy made that point to his dad. You know, where his dad was saying, basically, "You little runts," you know, and he goes, "Well, you fought a war so little runts like me could have freedom." Basically, is what Tommy. But you know, the mother kicks the father out because he's an abusive fecker. But then you know the Doctor, which I think is a great moment, by the way. You know, where Tommy is not interested in going with his dad, and the Doctor basically tells him, "Look, but he is your dad." You know, the Doctor could understand to a certain extent where the father was coming from because it was a different era. He was fighting fascism and all of that, Nazism and stuff. So, you know, in a way, you know, they fought it, but because they had to basically fight it, they ended up. I'm not saying becoming the fascists because they didn't, but UK was a lot more. It was London, especially England, a lot more stricter back then. Because you know they were fighting a war for years, and you know all of a sudden, you know, they were out of war. It was a new dawn. But some of the old guard, you know, they were still very cautious. There could have been another war around the corner and stuff. So they were always going to be very cautious, very strict with their kids. Um, and I did like the moment where his dad is leaving, the mother kicks him out, kicks the husband out. And as I said, the Doctor goes, "Look, but he's your dad. You know, he might be a bloody idiot sometimes or whatever, but he's your dad." You know, and then Tommy runs to his dad, takes his suitcase, and his dad's still proud because the proud man that he is, and he walks, but he knows that his son still loves him, and I thought that was a good message. I have to be honest, but I just didn't like. I'm hungry. That annoyed me, but other than that, it's a decent enough episode. But but my favorite two-parter, well, actually, it's up there as my favorite two-parter of the RTD era, and it's the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. Now, I love these episodes. I mean, the very first scene in the Impossible Planet is brilliant, where they land on this. They don't know what they've landed on, but they've landed on something. They walk into this room, and literally they see "Welcome to Hell" written on the wall. The music in the background gives it a creepy tone. Then all of a sudden, then these oods burst through the door, and then we get a little, what's going to happen next sort of thing, because the titles roll then, because the oods communicator is not working properly. But to start off the episode like that, absolutely brilliant. But the music is creepy in this. The fact that the top basically is a Satan, is a not Satan, what is it? I thought that was brilliant. Clever story as well. I thought that the whole cast, including the supporting cast, every single one of them. Toby, the guy that was possessed, I thought he was brilliant in it. The captain, obviously, he was very good. I did like the captain in it. He wasn't sure about himself, but the Doctor and Rose keep believing in yourself, basically. And of course, you had the security officer, and he had a big dark secret and stuff. I liked it. Creepy, creepy. And the CGI brilliant in this. But again, RTD very clever. You very clever way of incorporating legends and stuff into stories the way he does. I just thought it was brilliant. I mean, the whole scene with the black hole is just, when they see it for the first time and stuff like that, and you see their faces, and the Doctor's like, well, that's impossible. It's just, it's brilliant, and it's got the right amount of creepiness. For me, this is the scariest two-parter that we've had up up until now. Obviously, this is second series now, but up until now, this two-parter for me has been the scariest. I love this two-parter, still do. I'll watch this just as one. Well, obviously, it is one story, but you know what I mean. If I want to go back and watch an RTD story, and I'm in the humor, that'll be the first story that I'll go to. That two-parter. Love it. Still holds up today. CGI is amazing. There's some sad moments in it as well. The poor Ood obviously gets sacrificed, which was sad as well. But you didn't think they were going to get out of it. But your man that plays Toby, the guy that's possessed, he steals the show for me. I have to be honest. He was brilliant. Brilliant. But again, that story wouldn't have worked if you didn't have a great writer. But I did love that two-parter. Now again, the AI for that 85 and 86 respectively. 6.32 million and just over 6 million then for that. Now, as you can see with the ratings for series 2, they were up and down. They were up and down. Right? Up and down. And that's what happens with TV shows. But again, if you check the consolidated figures, see, when the other side argue with us about how successful Jodie Whittaker's era is, they never use the consolidated figures. They always use the overnights, because that's how they try to fill their audience. Now, the next episode is not liked by a lot of people. But for me, I take it for what it is. Obviously, Peter Kay was in this episode. Now, I will say I don't like his alien costume. I've made that clear. But as a story, I actually did like this. For a lot of people, they didn't. But I did. I thought it was a very funny episode. While also dealing with some, real life issues. Like, for example, one of the Linda group members' daughter obviously went missing in London. I think one of the other characters, their wife pass away or something like that? So they all had, or their wife went missing or something like that. But I loved it. I loved it where they, you know, where these people all came together. You know, they'd all gone through something traumatic. They found each other. They formed together to to talk about their problems, talk about basically what they were going through as well, help each other through. And then, of course, Peter Kennedy comes into the picture. And by this time, Linda has turned into a bit of a social club. They make each other food and stuff like that, and they start talking and they forget about their problems and their worries, and then they start singing songs together. But Peter Kennedy comes in and he basically changes all that and basically reminds them why they set up Linda in the first place. It was to find, you know, to find their missing loved ones, but and also to find the doctor. Obviously, for Elton, the doctor was an important figure for him because when he was a kid, his mother died, and when he went down into the room, the doctor was standing over his mother's body, looking out the window, and Elton, I think, thought the doctor had murdered his mother. So, they start going out looking for the doctor, and obviously, eventually they do find them, but obviously, Peter Kennedy is not who he seems because he ends up being an Absorbaloff, which is a relation to the Slovene uh, stupid costume design anyway. But this was the thing about RTD, though, I will say. He did have fan competitions and he did allow fans create monsters. So this was a monster that was created by a fan. So I can't criticize him for that, but it was an awful design. So basically what happens is most of the Linda group gets absorbed. Elton is the last one left. The doctor tricks the absorber off, obviously. There are some heartbreaking moments, though, because this is the episode where we see it from Jackie's point of view. Obviously, her daughter has gone off. She knows that there's dangers where they face, and she opens up to Elton, and she's basically devastated because she's worried whether her daughter and obviously the doctor, and she'll protect them at all costs, and there are some, you could tell that Jackie is quite vulnerable, and she's missing her daughter and stuff. So there are some real moments there again, but again, this is what RTD is great at: the human emotion, human nature. He knows how to translate it well on screen, unlike Chris Chibnall, who thinks character development is thrown in a line here and there, and not shown at else then for a season or two, and then thrown in another line, and there's your character development. It's well thought out process with RTD. The thing that's creepy for me is the end scene where Ursula, the doctor manages to bring Ursula back, but as a slab. And there's a bit of a scene at the end which is a bit creepy. Elton talks about how he still has a sex life with this slab, Ursula. I thought that was a bit creepy, but I love the music. There were some funny moments in it, but for me, I'm a fan of Love of Monsters, and it gets quite a lot of stick, but I do like that episode. But of course, the next episode is Fair Hawk. Now, this was obviously a time where the UK was proud because they knew they were going to be hosting the Olympics. This is 2006, obviously, this series, wasn't it? Yeah, 2006. So 6 years, from London 2012. And, you know, you could tell that this was RTD again showcasing Britain. And, you know, so basically, we have the Doctor and Rose land on this housing estate, and they soon realize that kids are gone missing. I don't really like talking about this episode, to be honest. Even talking about it's boring the crap out of me. Anyway, let's get to the crunch, right? So the crunch is that it's this kid called Chloe, who everybody thought was the timeless child, but how dumb were all those people? Anyway, Chloe Webber is a little girl, and her mother and herself were the victims of abuse. Were victims of abuse. Her dad was a nasty piece of work, basically. Now, again, when I see people talk about that, this is one thing I will call out. When I see people, oh, look, they've made another white male bad. Well, RTD did it, but again, it was how RTD did this is the difference. Again, he understood human connection. He understood human nature and human behavior and human psychological psychological behavior and all of this. This is what this man's a genius at. This is why I can't wait for him to come back. But anyway, this girl Zoe Webber, she grows up and she feels like she's alone. She's a kind of an outsider. You know, she doesn't have any friends. And then it turns out that this girl, every time she draws something, you know, it disappears. And the Doctor and Rose soon realize that she's responsible for all the kids going missing. And then it turns out then there's an entity called the Eyeless. Is it the Eyeless? Which is the Eyeless. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Anyway, that's a little ship, and they've lost their family, and basically connects to Zoe Webber and all of this because they're two lonely little things. But I'll just look at the end. Then the Doctor saves the day. Chloe Webber and her mother sing this annoying song through the feckin' episode, which does me fucking head in. Zoe Webber feckin' annoys me as well. And I mean, our mother is stupid in that episode because, like, the Doctor says, take away all the markers and the pencils and stuff like that. Make sure you do a great job. And but still, Chloe's able to get her hands on more markers because the mother didn't do her job properly by actually checking. But anyway, Doctor saves the day. The fella that's carrying the Olympic torch is wounded. So, you know, the Doctor grabs the torch, and I do think that's a funny moment. I will actually say it's a funny moment where he lights the Olympic torch. But you could see that RTD, as a British person, was proud that the UK had got the Olympics, and that's how he was able to rope it in for that story. But I hate that story. I absolutely cannot stand it. Because besides the mother and the grandmother, the old woman that was in it, I thought the supporting cast were quite weak. To be quite honest with you, the old woman, the nosy old woman, but she kind of knew that there was something going on. She was good, and I did look. And Zoe Webber's mother, yes, she had a few scenes in her, but not that many. But she's a good actress anyway. But yeah, I just not a fan. But there is a moment. There is a moment at the end of that episode where they're eating the cakes with the ball bearings on, and then the doctor say, oh, I think there's something or something like that. There's something coming, or I can feel something is coming, and then you get the music then, and then you know something is actually going to happen. But yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Anyway, the little alien dude was reunited with its family. Chloe Webber and her mother could finally move on from the toxic entity father thing that was feeding off Chloe Webber's fears and all of that. So yeah, that was that. But then we got Army of Ghosts. Army of Ghosts, wasn't it? Hold on. Yeah, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Right. Anyway, so Army of Ghosts is the return of the Cybermen, but we don't know that. So what happens is the Doctor and Rose come back. They come back to Earth, and basically they're back to visit Jackie, and they need some laundry done. And while they're there, Jackie makes the revelation that she's been talking to Rose, his grandfather, but it turns out that her grandfather is dead. Then it goes into the titles because they wanted to leave us because Rose goes to the Doctor. I think she's gone mad. She lost the plot. Her dad passed away years ago of a heart attack. So she's got a bit crazy. So it goes into the titles and come back, and then Rose tries to explain, look, you do know granddad is dead. And she goes, yeah, but he'll be here now in a minute. And then, of course, then we get to see these ghosts appear out of nowhere. So, obviously, the Doctor sees this and he thinks, oh, what's going on here? Got to investigate this. So, he doesn't believe Jackie. So he asks Jackie what happens. So we all woke up one day and these things were just here, and first people panicked, and it was mayhem, but then we soon realized that it was our loved ones come back from the dead. And basically it was a clip of EastEnders where Dorothy Ten came back from the grave. Peggy Mitchell is given out. that was a funny scene. But the Doctor knows that there's something more going on. So you have a little of a Ghostbusters throwback. David Tennant puts on his little proton pack and stuff like this, starts setting up an old thing to trap one of these so-called ghosts. And then he realizes pretty quick that they're not all what they seem. And then, of course, what happens then is that, which I should have said actually in Tooth and Claw. So at the end of Tooth and Claw, I forgot to say that Queen Victoria set up Torchwood, right? So I should have actually mentioned that. So we'll just, because obviously I've got to make this point, but it soon comes clear that there's something going on, and then the Doctor then obviously finds out that it's this group Torchwood, and basically they reveal that they're the ones that shot down the Sycorax, and the Doctor basically said, well, you killed them all, well, that was us, blah 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 blah, and then start showing the Doctor these fancy weapons. And then the Doctor finds out what is actually going on. And then the Doctor explains to them, well, you don't know what's coming through the void, and then it tries to explain, well, you've opened a crack now and it's going to keep cracking eventually, then they're all going to flood through. But then at the same time, in this base, they've got this sphere, and it registers no readings, and they can't get inside it, and they're wondering what's inside the sphere. And then, of course, we get the return of Mickey Smith. So all hell breaks loose. The ghosts start to pair. They're controlling the ghosts, so they do the launch for the ghosts again. All of a sudden, then something takes over them, and then blah 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 blah. Oh no, they're being converted by Cyber. I forgot to mention as well, the Cybermen are back, by the way. So it's the Cybermen basically. They come through. They've obviously taken over the whole planet. the sphere opens and out pops Daleks, and then we get one of the most iconic scenes in that two-parter is where the Dalek and the Cybermen are actually having a conversation. And very good. Basically, the Doctor realizes that he can actually save everybody, but it's going to come at a cost, because anybody that's either traveled in the TARDIS or, well, no, it's because they were in the parallel universe. Sorry, they got this void stuff on them or something. So the Doctor figures out a plan to kind of suck the Daleks and all of this crap into this void. But he could lose Rose in the process. So he tells Rose she has to go with her mother, and parallel version of P has come back into the picture. I'll probably miss loads, but basically I love this two-parter. Except for, again, I thought the resolution was a bit of a cop out. I would have liked to see, to be quite honest with you, for me, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, you could have done a whole series arc with those two stories alone. And that's what I think that deserved, was a serious arc. But two-parter, yeah, it did its job, but it was actually a good way to end the series, except for, right, and I'm just going to say this scene still bothers me to this day. The fact that the Doctor blew a hole in the universe just to talk to Rose again. I don't know what makes Rose so fucking special. Anyway, but that annoyed me. And I just hate that whole sequence, actually. But that's the thing that annoyed me about it. This is when all the lovey-dovey crap start coming into it. With the Doctor and David, Rose and David Tennant's Doctor. Yeah, full blown then at that stage it was. Get over it. You can't be with you. He's a Time Lord. You're going to grow old and die. He's not. But again, Rose is selfish. And then eventually she does get her wish. You all know what I'm talking about. So, yeah. So that's serious too. And yeah, big fan of series too. But this is a series now that the next one is a series that is underrated in my opinion. And it does start off with The Runaway Bride. So the next Christmas special was The Runaway Bride. And it got 9.5 million people watching, and the AI was 84. Anyway, actually, the AI for the other two, I forgot to tell you, but Jesus, I'd have to go back in. Hold on. I suppose if I'm gonna. So the AI for those last two episodes of season 2 were. Where are we? 86 and 89 respectively, and 8 million, over 8 million for both episodes as well. So not bad. Now let's go on to the next one. So obviously The Runaway Bride. Now for a lot of people didn't like Catherine Tate. And I remember at the time a lot of people not liking it. Runaway Bride for me is an interesting story, but I think where it fails for me is it wasn't as strong as a story as the Christmas Invasion. Obviously, you had the Arachnos Queen. Interesting that he incorporated you know, how the earth was created because of the arachnos, which I thought was an interesting concept. Now, obviously, you know, Donna is the moral compass of the Doctor. Because remember, if she didn't tell the Doctor to stop, you know, he would have ended up dead, because Thorne left, obviously, in Series 4. We get to see what the consequences were if Donna wasn't there, which we'll get into when we get to that. But look, for me, the first episode, Runaway Bride, um, obviously the Christmas special, I should say. It wasn't bad, but was it as good as the Christmas Invasion? No. But again, it was a decent story, and the Doctor and Donna do have their moments, I have to say, in this episode. And look, I didn't mind catching Tate. I get her humor, Um, I don't mind her humor. But a lot of people didn't want to catch and Tate at first. But of course, in Series 3, we were introduced to a new companion, Martha Jones. And the first episode of that, obviously, was Smith and Jones. And this is where we had the Jadoon. So we got introduced to the Jadoon. And basically what happens is the hospital that Martha Jones is working in has a space fugitive on the hospital. So what the Jadoon do is they basically transport the Earth onto the moon. And I think the reason why they did that is because of the Shadow Proclamation. I think that's how it was explained, why they brought the Earth, brought the hospital onto the moon. Now, the moon is obviously, it's got no atmosphere, so the Jadoon have to put a bubble around the hospital so they have oxygen. And basically what the Jadoon are, they're basically police for her, and they're looking for this fugitive who has killed a princess. Miss Finnegan was the old lady's name, and I thought, again, the actress that's playing the Plasmavore was a great actress, actually. Again, the supporting cast in this were actually pretty good. The only thing I didn't like about was the what's that bleeding lip cream? Zavoirax bikers, the bikers with all that leather gear. I didn't like. I don't. I can understand. Yeah, but listen, if you're undercover, obviously you're gonna have to kind of blend in and stuff. So maybe that's why they went with a biker, because they could have the helmet on. But I thought that was a bit bleeding stupid. So obviously this villain needs to get away from the Doctor, so she's willing to basically blow up the hospital. But it turns out that if she does that, she'll wipe out half of the planet, and the Doctor obviously can't have that. So along with Martha Jones, the Doctor and Martha try and defeat this Plasmavore and try, or Miss Finnegan, by using the MRI machine that she has actually turned into a weapon to try and destroy all of these. But but at the end of the day, she manages to keep herself hidden because she's drinking human blood. And again, that scene where she gets the straw and the hospital administrator and the manager, and she basically sucks the blood out of his vein. Again, you know, RTD doesn't hold back on that scene. But again, I loved the whole look. I like that. I liked it. I thought it was a great episode. To be quite honest with you, at the end of the day, the Doctor and Martha It's actually literally Martha saves the doctor and saves the day because, you know, um, Martha figures out that, oh, she's actually sucked the doctor's blood, so the doctor is alien. So she tells the Jadoon to scan her again, and the Jadoon won't at first, but then she grabs the scanner, if I remember correctly, and she scans it, and then they realize that they've got the villain, and she gets executed basically, and then basically they asked the Jadoon, well, put the hospital back now. You got your villain, blah, blah, blah. And then the doctor is wondering if they're going to do it. And then, Martha saves his life because he could have died. She basically literally gives him her last breath and saves the day. Then at the end of the episode, then he basically, as a reward for saving his life, he offers to bring Martha on an adventure, and then that's when they end up in was it London for the Shakespeare Code, and this episode is written by Garrett Roberts. And at this stage, by the way, just to let you know, so the AI for as I said, for the runaway bride was, hold on, here we go, was 84. For the Smith and Jones, the AI was 88. And for the Shakespeare Code, it was 87. Now, the Shakespeare Code is another good episode, good solid episode for me. Again, I think I've said this over the years. I think Series 3 is criminally underrated. It's got some great stories. But I think a lot of fans were still getting over the fact that we'd lost Rose Tyler. And again, in this episode, the doctor is criticized for his treatment of Martha Jones. So basically, they land near the Globe Theatre. They basically find out that there's some shit going down, with witches. But they turn out to be Carbonites, and basically they're bad. And the doctor, along with William Shakespeare, have to try save the day, and they basically do. And then there's a nice little scene right at the end where the Queen, which I think it's Elizabeth I, isn't it? And she calls the doctor, and he runs off. Which I've always over the years wanted them to kind of address that a little bit more. But the Shakespeare Code, another solid episode. And as I said, the AI there was 87. The next episode was a trip down memory lane for Classic Who fans when the Macra came back. Unfortunately for me, look, I love Gridlocked. It's a great episode. But for me, I was a bit disappointed that the Macra weren't utilised a lot more in this story, to be quite honest with you. But it was a throwback to the Macra terror. To the Macra, I should say. And I thought it was very good. So the doctor goes back to New Earth, and he realises something is not quite right. And as he goes on in these investigations, he sees that people are basically in their cars for years. They haven't had any outside communication with the Senate or anybody, police officers, and the doctor. The doctor is suspicious of all of that, and there are some really heartwarming moments. There's the part where they're all singing the song, and they're holding hands with each other, and they go through each car, and they're singing, and people are getting emotional. Again, RTD great with the heartstrings there. He can pull on them anytime he wants. Um, and that's where we meet. Well, no, actually, we met the face of Bo already, but we meet the face of Bo again. And basically, they find out that these moods, they're like little stickers that they stuck on the neck, moods. I think I've seen that in, wasn't that in Firefly as well? Not Firefly. I think it was the actual movie itself or something though, when they using moods or something. But same thing here. They were using moods and something happened and people just basically gave up on life, I think, or stuff like that. They all died. They died out. And of course, we get to meet the cat lady again. What was her name in it again? Sister, what's her face? Sister, uh, Sister, Novice Haim. Novice Haim. So Novice Haim, obviously, for her penance for the crimes that she committed in the episodes that I spoke about earlier on, she decides to stay with the face of Bo and to keep him alive, basically. And basically, the doctor does forgive her if you look at that scene, because she did. She stuck around. She tried to make amends, but basically, what happens is the doctor ends up saving them all. Anyway, the Macra are there, but as I said, I would have loved to see a little bit more of them. But we did get a few exciting scenes with the Macra tried to take that car. Do you remember with the young woman in it? Oh yeah, I forgot to add. Sorry, because I'm doing this all arseways now at this stage. But Martha was kidnapped, and the doctor has to try find Martha as well, which added another element to the story. And this is also, Martha has been questioning the doctor quite a lot since she came onto the TARDIS, and we do know that the doctor has lied to her on several occasions, even when he spoke about his people. But there is a moment with the two of them where he's talking about Gallifrey to Martha. And I have to say, I think that's the best scene actually in that whole episode, where he's talking about it. And David Tennant's performance is so convincing. You literally are heartbroken for him when he's talking about Gallifrey. But we do get to see the beautiful Gallifrey that RTD has created for this scene. The Citadel is there. It's bloody lovely. Of course, we won't get into what happens Gallifrey later on. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. But again, this is where the doctor basically says to her, look, I lied to you because it felt good, because I could think of me people being alive again. And on one hand, you could understand it, but on the other hand, he was coming clean, and he was basically, letting her know, why. And it is quite sad. It is quite sad. But the face of Bo does survive, and he basically leaves the doctor with a message and says that they will meet again for one final time. And yeah, we won't get into that, yeah, but there you go. So then we had a two-parter which divides a lot of people. It's Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. Now, all I'm going to say here is this about this episode, because I want to move swiftly on, because I've just realized what time it is, and we haven't even got the series 4 yet. So basically, this two-parter for me had some good ideas in it. We also had the Cult of Skaro. Unfortunately, I thought it was purely executed. The human Dalek hybrid was a good concept to a certain extent, but you're kind of meddling with the Daleks. But can understand what he was trying to do. He's trying to do something different with the Daleks, but it's not my favorite two-parter, I have to say. And the New York accent that the actors and actresses, if they really are from New York, I'm sorry, and no offense to people that watch me from New York, if there's any out there, but that old New York accent is very annoying, very annoying. But that's all I'm going to say about that because, again, not my favorite two-part story. We did have the Lazarus experiment, which I did like. Mark Gatiss is actually in that episode. The CGI is absolutely awful, but it was a good setup for what was to come later on. I think if you look at it that way, it's a much better episode. But overall, we got to see Martha's family a little bit more. Um, you know, uh, Someone tries to tell Martha's mother that the doctor is actually a bad person. The doctor gets a smack in the face for his troubles. But again, it's Martha who kind of saves the day in the whole episode. And this was the episode where he was dropping her off, basically. She'd got her trips and he was basically going to leave her there. And she basically says that she doesn't want to just, be a bit part. I'm either coming fully with you or I'm not going with you at all, basically, was her attitude. But the Lazarus experiment, I did like it. You had a Corrie legend in it as well. Absolutely brilliant. Again, talking about World War II and the horrors of World War II and what people had to do. And, obviously, Richard Lazarus, he lived through that and he was talking about his memories as a kid and, you know, he's trying to unlock his DNA so he can become young again for him and his elite friends. But obviously, it has a bit of a side effect, and he turns into this kind of scorpion-looking CGI mess, which is not great to look at now. But if I always thought with that scene, they should have used practical or animatronics or something different than the CGI. But not a bad episode. Next episode, I'm not even going to talk about. It's 42. You know what I think about that episode. I've spoke about it plenty of times. It's a Chris Chibnall episode. It's a countdown episode. It's an episode where the characters are not are poorly developed, and it's a script that are told went through massive rewrites. So yeah. But just to let you know, the AI for the Dalek two-parter, sorry folks, was where am I? There we go. So we had 6.5, just over 6.5 million watched the first episode, and the AI was 86. And we just had under 7 million watch the second episode, and the AI there was 85. The Lazarus experiment, 86 AI, and just over 7,200,000 nearly watched that one. And the AI, as I said, was 86. 42 7.41 million people watched the AI was 85. And then we had Human Nature and Family of Blood, another story written by Paul Cornell. And what can I say? I mean, this is a brilliant two-parter. And again, respectfully, the AI on both episodes is 86. But again, the Doctor's being chased through the galaxy by the Family of Blood, and he has to change his identity. He has to become human, and he ends up in England in 1913. So just before, a few years before World War One breaks out. He's hidden. He's hidden himself inside a fob watch. Well, the Time Lord part of himself in a fob watch, Martha is undercover as a maid, and they're working at this school. Um, and basically, again, Martha Jones, being the companion that she is, she's there to make sure that the doctor and herself are safe. Basically, the doctor's idea is that, well, this family is going to chase them through time and space, but if he changes into a human and he waits, they will they will basically get weak or they'll die, and he won't have to keep running. Of course, then complications start happening. These family of blood have landed in the actual town and place where the doctor and Martha have travelled. Obviously, they've tracked down the TARDIS, and all hell breaks loose. And again, this episode shows what those kids went through, because when they're killing those scarecrows, they're coming to life, by the way, controlled by the family of blood. The family of blood are basically bombing this town as well. But there's a moment in it with the scarecrows, with the young lads. It doesn't matter how much you teach people, putting a bullet in someone, it's not an easy thing to do. And you see these kids crying and stuff. And I thought that was a really sad moment. Again, these are two episodes that are criticized by the other side. And they don't understand that back then, because they talk about how abusive it is, and again, how the doctors are racist and all of this sort of rubbish. But the doctor was not racist to Martha Jones, because he was the one that had Martha Jones with him, right? You look at the rest of the maids, right? The doctor, even as John Smith, wasn't racist. Yes, he did have the values of that time imprinted into his head, but he had enough residual energy, or whatever it's called, to take Martha in. So he knew Martha would have his back, basically, because I think he says she was with the family a long time or something like that, and blah blah blah. And everybody in the school basically, didn't really say anything, except for one or two of them that, decided to be racist assholes. But that's the time it was. But these kids don't understand context, that was back in the day, but apparently, John Smith was racist, which I don't agree. Anyway, cut long story short, there's a lot of death and destruction, and then finally, then the doctor has to reveal himself, because, too many people have died. But at this stage, he's tricked them, he's blown up their ship, and then basically he takes them, and then he makes one of them, if I remember, he tricks one into a supernova or a black hole. He puts the little girl in the mirror, which we're not going to get into, because obviously Cornell did a lockdown story, which I'm not even going to talk about. But anyway, forget about that. He tricks some of them, and he puts the girl in the glass, and he makes one of them a scarecrow, and all of this, and that's the fury of a Time Lord and all of that. And it was a great story, great two-parter. Going to have an early night. Good night, Noel. Yeah, well, I'm nearly finished. But yeah, Chris, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. We still have 15 people watching right now. Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe. The next episode we had after that was Blink. And it's the first Weeping Angels story. Again, to me, this is overrated. But it's a great story. It's a simple story. And it's up there. The AI for this was 87, by the way. 6.62 million people watched as well. And it was a Stephen Moffat episode, of course. And great story. And this was when Moffat was at his best. You didn't need a complicated story. The story is quite simple, actually. But it's the clever elements that he added to it, which made this story. But it is worth a watch, and it is one of my favorite episodes. I know I'm not going into too much detail as I did with the last ones, but Literally, I was supposed to bring Ted out 50 minutes ago, so I have to wrap this up. I might even stop here at Series 3, and then maybe tomorrow we will continue with Series 4 and the specials. That's what I might do. I'll re-edit this video, the title of this video, The Late Night Zone RTD. We discuss Series 1 to 3. So we had Utopia and the Sound of the Drums and The Last of the Time Lords. And I call this a three-part finale anyway, because we know what happens in the last two episodes. So in Utopia, the Doctor has parked the TARDIS in Cardiff to refuel. Captain Jack sees the TARDIS from Torchwood, goes out to talk to the Doctor. The Doctor sees him, tries to fly away. Jack jumps onto the TARDIS. Pretty iconic scene, if you ask me. He's gone through the time vortex, and they land on this planet called Mascararo. If I'm Mascasero. And it's at the end of the universe, 100 trillion years in the future. And they're surrounded by a group of nasties called the Future Kind. And they've turned into cannibals, basically. And there's this rocket that this Professor Yana is building. And basically, he wants to bring them to Utopia to save them from the end of the universe. Of course, all is not what it seems. And after a bit of sabotage from Future Kind, they basically sabotage. After the sabotage of Future Time, Jack, this is where we learn more about Jack not dying anymore, which is a very interesting thing. But then Martha notices that Professor Yana has this fob watch that's exactly like the fob watch that she remembers that the Doctor has. And she starts questioning him, the Professor Yana, about it. And while she's questioning him, Professor Yana starts hearing these voices all of a sudden and stuff while he's feeling the fob watch. And he says that he can't open it because it's broken, but it's a perception filter. Anyway, push comes to shove, and it turns out that, Martha thinks there's something seriously going on, so she lays it down to the Doctor, and Jack, after they've completed their business, says, listen, Professor Yana has a fob watch like you, Doctor. And he goes, it's exactly like you. He goes, what do you mean? He says, all Time Lords are dead. And she goes, well, he has this fob watch, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, who's it? And then the Doctor starts losing his, well, he can't see the watch. He can't open the watch and all this. And then blah, blah, blah. The Doctor starts panicking. And then he's thinking, it might be a good Time Lord. But then it turns out it's the Master. And that's the big reveal. So the Master then has a companion that has been working with him for all of these years. Chanto. And basically, he tries to kill her because she finds out that he's evil, and she tries to kill him, but he tries to kill her. But then in her last breath, she shoots him, and he has to regenerate. And then when he regenerates, we find out he's the Master. So the Master steals the Doctor's TARDIS. He fecks off the top. The Doctor does something with the screwdriver and locks it to a certain position, so he can only go to a certain time, basically. And Jack, Martha, and the Doctor are stuck with the future kind. And obviously Jack then, has needs his vortex manipulator repaired. And then the Doctor, Martha, and Jack in the next episode end up in present day London, where after the general election. And it's then the Doctor realizes that the Master is actually Prime Minister. And then basically the Doctor, Martha, and Captain Jack are on the run. Martha's family is kidnapped and all of this, and the Toclafane are revealed. The President of the United States is, obviously, he's all saying, I can't say it on stream, but you know what happened to him in the show. All hell breaks loose, and then basically they defeat the Master and all of that, and then the Master ends up being shot. He won't regenerate. The Doctor ends up being absolutely devastated because it's the last connection to his people, so he thinks. And look, I actually like this three-parter. And there's so much going on in it. I think Series 3, honestly, is very underrated. I don't know what you guys think, but let me know in the comments. Seriously, I wish I could have went on for a little bit longer. I obviously didn't mean to go this long. I was hoping to keep it short, but because they're so good and there's so much to talk about, obviously we did go over time. So what we'll do is we'll finish this conversation soon. And then on that stream, we will focus on Series 4, RTD's final series. And then we will also talk about the specials before David Tennant finally departs. So I hope you have enjoyed this stream. Listen, I was going to come on, as I said, and talk about something completely different. I was actually going to come on and talk about the behavior of some people in the fandom that are stirring up crap again. But you know what? I decided against it. I wanted to do something positive and talk about something that, that we all enjoyed. And we did actually enjoy the RTD era quite a lot. So I said, why not talk about, favorite episodes, least favorite episodes, give me your opinions. So they're my opinions. I hope you've I hope you've enjoyed the stream. I want to thank everybody for joining me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you soon, folks. Thank you, everybody in the chat that left a comment. I really appreciate it. That's it for now. I'll say good night, stay safe, look after yourselves, and enjoy the rest of your week. Good night, folks. Have a good one.